Hello, and welcome back to English Without Limit. I'm Julia, and I'm so glad you're here with me today. Whether you're walking to work, cooking dinner, or just relaxing with your headphones on, this time is for you. This space is a place where you don't have to feel pressure or perfection. We are here to practice together, to grow step by step, and to make the English you hear around you feel more natural and less stressful. So first, let me ask you a simple question. Have you ever watched a movie, a TV show, or a YouTube video in English and felt like everyone was talking too fast? Like you could only catch one word out of 5? Or maybe you've paused a video 10 times just to understand a single sentence. If that sounds familiar, you are not alone. I've met learners from all over the world who feel the same way. They tell me, "Julia, I studied English in school. I know the grammar. I even read well. But when native speakers talk in real life, I feel completely lost." And every time I tell them this, what you're experiencing is normal. It's not a problem with you. It's not because your brain isn't fast enough. It's because natural spoken English, especially the American variety, doesn't sound like what we see in textbooks or classroom dialogues. People don't speak with perfect sentences. They speak in rhythms. They drop sounds. They blend words. They use idioms, expressions, shortcuts. And unless you've had regular contact with that kind of English, of course, it's going to feel overwhelming at first. That's exactly why I created this episode. Today, I want to help you understand American English in a more natural, fluent way. I want to take away some of the stress, the guessing, the feeling of failure. I want to help you hear patterns instead of chaos. Because when you start listening differently, your brain begins to adjust. You start to catch phrases, not just words. You begin to predict what's coming next. You start feeling the flow of English instead of translating everything in your head. This is not something that only advanced learners can do. This is something anyone can begin doing, no matter their level, once they understand how to listen with more confidence and less fear. But before we dive in, I want to say something important. I know that many of you listening today are on your own learning journey. Some of you are living in English-speaking countries and trying to survive daily conversations. Others are preparing for job interviews, international exams, or just dreaming of traveling with confidence. Wherever you are, I want you to know that you belong here. You are not behind. You are not too late. And most importantly, you are not the only one who struggles to understand fast, fluent, native-level English. This podcast is a space for all of us. We learn together. We grow together. And every single listener here helps make this community stronger. So, if this episode resonates with you so far, I invite you to take one small action that helps not just you, but others too. Subscribe to this podcast, leave a like, share it with a friend who's also learning English. It may seem like a small thing, but every click, every subscription helps this content reach someone who might feel lost or discouraged. When you support this podcast, you're helping someone else say, "Wait, I'm not the only one." You're helping someone feel less alone in their journey. And that is something powerful. Now, I know that sometimes English content can feel serious or academic. And I want you to know that's not what we do here. This is not a classroom. This is a conversation. I don't want you to feel like you need to sit with a notebook and write everything down perfectly. I don't want you to worry about mistakes or complicated grammar rules. I want you to feel like we're just talking, like I'm right here with you, guiding you, sharing what works, and reminding you that fluency comes from connection, not from pressure. So take a deep breath, relax your shoulders, and let your ears do the learning today. Because listening is a powerful skill. It's often underestimated, but it's the key to unlocking fluency. When you start to understand how native speakers really talk, you begin to absorb the rhythm of the language. You start hearing patterns. You begin to feel the meaning of phrases without needing to translate them. And slowly, something amazing happens. You start thinking in English, not just understanding individual words, but feeling entire ideas. And once you can do that, speaking becomes easier too. I've seen this happen again and again with students and listeners from different parts of the world. People just like you. A young woman from Rome who told me she used to be afraid to speak at her internship in Chicago because she couldn't follow meetings. A guy from Munich who could write essays but couldn't keep up with conversations and movies. A university student from Marseille who froze every time someone asked her a question in a video call. These people didn't lack vocabulary. They just needed a new way to listen, a way that felt real, human, and doable. And that's exactly what we'll explore in today's episode. I'll share real-life stories, practical tips, and listening strategies that help you go from overwhelmed to connected. I'll show you how to train your ear to understand fast English, not by memorizing more, but by hearing patterns, learning chunks, and building natural habits. I'll also introduce you to characters from different cities across Europe who have found their own path to listening fluency, not through perfection, but through practice. And through that, I hope you'll see yourself in their journeys and feel inspired to continue yours. So, wherever you are in the world, however fluent you feel today, you are part of this conversation. And I'm here with you. Let's begin. When people first start learning English, they often believe that if they memorize enough words and study enough grammar rules, they will be able to understand anyone who speaks the language. That's what we're taught in school. We go through exercises, we fill in blanks, we memorize verb charts, and we read formal texts. But then we turn on a real conversation, a podcast, a movie, or a video call with native speakers. And suddenly, everything feels different, fast, unpredictable, even messy. Many learners feel confused. They think, I studied so much. Why can't I understand this? And that's the moment when many people start blaming themselves. They think they're not smart enough or not trying hard enough. But the truth is, the problem isn't you. The problem is the gap between the English you studied and the English that people actually speak. Textbook English is like a clean, polished version of the language. It's slow, clear, and carefully structured. It's designed to teach rules, which is helpful when you're beginning. But spoken English in real life, especially American English, is very different. It's full of reduced sounds, contractions, connected speech, unfinished sentences, interruptions, slang, and cultural references. When native speakers talk to each other, they're not thinking about grammar rules. They're thinking about getting their message across quickly and naturally. That's why they often say gonna instead of going to, or lemme instead of let me. They might drop entire words and expect the listener to fill in the blanks based on context. And they do this unconsciously all the time. Once you understand this difference, something shifts. You begin to realize that struggling to understand fluent English doesn't mean you're bad at English. It just means that what you've studied isn't the same as what you're hearing now. And that's okay. It's not a sign of failure. It's a sign that you're transitioning from classroom English to real-world English. That's a powerful step. When you accept this reality, you start to let go of some of the pressure. You stop expecting yourself to understand every single word, and you start focusing on the bigger picture, on the rhythm, the tone, the phrases that repeat, and the ideas behind the words. That's when real learning begins. One of the most frustrating things I hear from learners is that they feel like they're stuck in the middle. They can read articles, understand written instructions, maybe even write emails in English. But when they try to watch a series or follow a fast conversation, they feel lost. They try to use the same strategies they used for reading, decoding every word, translating everything in their heads. But listening doesn't work like reading. In listening, time doesn't stop. You can't pause real people mid-sentence and analyze their grammar. You have to respond in real time. And that's what makes listening such a unique and sometimes difficult skill. It's not about being perfect. It's about being present. Fluent English, especially the way Americans speak in casual settings, often breaks all the rules you learned. For example, instead of saying, "What are you going to do about it?" someone might say, "What you gonna do about it?" That might sound like a joke, but it's real. It's how people speak naturally in everyday life. If you've never been exposed to that style of speaking, it makes perfect sense that it would sound confusing at first. Think about it. Even native English speakers sometimes struggle to understand people from different regions or backgrounds because of how much variation there is in spoken language. So, of course, learners are going to need time and practice to adjust their ears. That's not weakness. That's just part of the process. Let me tell you about a listener I met recently, Elena from Frankfurt. She studied English for more than 10 years. She passed exams with great scores. But when she moved to Seattle for work, she was shocked. In meetings, she could understand most of what was said. But in the kitchen, during lunch breaks, she felt completely out of place. People were talking quickly, making jokes, using phrases she had never seen in any textbook. She told me she felt stupid, like all her years of learning meant nothing. But when we talked more, she realized something important. She had never practiced understanding that kind of English, the casual, fast, real-world version. Once she stopped blaming herself and started practicing with authentic materials, things began to change. She started listening to podcasts where people spoke naturally. She began recognizing expressions, picking up on tone and pauses. Slowly, she started feeling more confident, even when she didn't catch every single word. Stories like Elena's are common, and what they show us is that the biggest obstacle isn't your ability, it's your expectations. When we expect real conversations to sound like textbook dialogues, we set ourselves up for disappointment. But when we start listening with curiosity instead of pressure, we begin to notice patterns. We begin to learn like native speakers learned, by hearing, noticing, imitating, and repeating. I know many of you listening right now have had moments when you felt discouraged. Maybe you avoided speaking because you were afraid you wouldn't understand the reply. Maybe you stopped watching shows in English because it felt like too much work. But what if I told you that these moments of confusion are not failures? They're signs that your brain is expanding. They're signs that you've reached the edge of your comfort zone and that you're about to grow. You're being exposed to real English, and even if it feels messy, your brain is already beginning to adapt. This process doesn't require perfection. It requires patience. It requires you to show up again and again and let your ears do the work. It requires you to give yourself permission not to understand everything, to let go of the need to translate every sentence, and to start trusting your intuition. And the good news is you don't have to do this alone. That's what this community is for. Every episode we create here is designed to help you get a little closer to that natural, fluent understanding of English, not through memorization, but through connection. So today, I want you to remind yourself the way native speakers talk is different from what you were taught, and that's not your fault. It's just the next stage in your journey. And you are absolutely capable of reaching it. Let me tell you about someone I met a while ago. Marta, from Barcelona. Like many of you, she had studied English for years. She knew the grammar rules, had a decent vocabulary, and even felt pretty confident reading articles and watching TV shows with English subtitles. But when she moved to Los Angeles for work, everything changed. She wasn't prepared for how different spoken English would feel in real life. In the office, during meetings, she could follow along most of the time, especially when people spoke slowly or used more formal language. But lunchtime was a completely different experience. At lunch, people spoke casually, quickly, and without much structure. They laughed, joked, interrupted each other, and used expressions that Marta had never seen in any textbook. They would say things like, "I'm beat," or "Wanna grab something real quick?" And Marta would sit there smiling politely, pretending to follow. While inside she felt completely disconnected, she told me that she started avoiding those social moments, afraid someone might talk directly to her and she wouldn't know how to respond. It made her feel small, like she wasn't good enough, even though she had worked so hard to learn the language. For a while, she tried using subtitles to help her at home. She would watch American shows with English subtitles, thinking that it would train her ears. But what happened was something many learners experience. She began reading more than listening. Her eyes would move faster than the voices, and she would start focusing on the text instead of the sounds. So when someone spoke to her in real life, where there were no subtitles to help, the confusion came back. It felt like she was stuck, and no matter how much she studied, she couldn't break through that barrier. One day, while riding the bus to work, Marta was scrolling through her phone and came across a podcast episode about daily English conversations. It wasn't a formal lesson. It was just two people talking about their day, about things like going to the grocery store or dealing with a noisy neighbor. She plugged in her headphones and decided to listen. Not to study, but just to pass the time. And something interesting happened. At first, it was difficult. She didn't understand every sentence, but instead of giving up, she kept listening. And instead of trying to catch every word, she began paying attention to the rhythm, the tone, the rise and fall of the voices. She started noticing patterns, how certain phrases came up again and again, how speakers used the same expressions to agree, to pause, to react. She stopped trying to understand every word and started focusing on chunks. Short phrases that carried meaning together, phrases like, I guess so, that makes sense, you know what I mean? Kind of, and not really. She realized that these little expressions were the real building blocks of casual English, and because she wasn't stopping the audio or translating in her head, her ears got used to the natural flow. Marta made a decision to turn her bus rides into her listening time. Every day for 20 to 30 minutes, she listened to casual podcasts. She didn't take notes. She didn't repeat or pause. She just listened with focus. And she made a small but powerful rule for herself. She wasn't going to worry about understanding everything. She would just let the language wash over her and trust that her brain would begin to adapt. And that's exactly what happened. After just a couple of weeks, something changed. One afternoon at lunch, one of her coworkers made a joke, and she understood it. Not just the words, but the feeling behind it. She laughed naturally and even responded. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't rehearsed. But it was real. Her coworkers noticed. One of them said, "Hey, your English is getting really good." And Marta felt something shift inside her. She felt proud, not because she had memorized new grammar, but because she was finally connecting. She told me that once she stopped chasing perfection and started listening to real people talking about real things, everything became easier. Her confidence grew. She began jumping into conversations more often, even if she made mistakes. And she realized that understanding spoken English wasn't about being smarter or studying harder. It was about listening differently, about letting go of the pressure to understand everything and instead tuning into the sounds, the rhythm, and the connection behind the words. Now, when she watches shows, she does it without subtitles. Not because she understands every single thing, but because she's learned to listen for meaning instead of trying to catch every word. She feels the language now, and that has made all the difference. Today, I want to share with you one of the most effective listening strategies I've ever taught, something that has helped countless learners move from confusion to real connection. It's simple, practical, and you can start using it right away. I call it the chunk strategy. The idea is this: instead of trying to understand English word by word, you focus on whole chunks of language, small groups of words that naturally go together. These chunks are how native speakers really speak and how they actually think. Once you learn to hear and use them, listening becomes faster, easier, and far less stressful. Let me explain why this matters. When we learn a new language, we're often taught to break it down into parts. We memorize individual words. We study grammar rules. We build sentences piece by piece. And while that's helpful in the beginning, it doesn't reflect how real language works in everyday conversation. Native speakers don't speak in isolated words. They speak in chunks. Instead of saying, "I'm gonna leave now," they say, "I'm gonna head out." Instead of saying, "Do you understand me?" they say, "You know what I mean?" These aren't random shortcuts. They're natural patterns that native speakers use without thinking. And once your ear starts picking up on these patterns, you begin to understand more, even when people speak quickly. Listening for chunks is like tuning into the music of the language. Each chunk has a rhythm, a tone, a shape. And once you hear it a few times, your brain starts to recognize it automatically. You stop needing to translate. You stop getting stuck on every word. You start feeling the meaning instead of thinking about the grammar. This is exactly how children learn their first language. They don't learn by studying grammar. They learn by hearing the same chunks again and again in different situations until they know what they mean and how they sound. And the good news is, adults can do the same thing. You just have to shift your focus. So, how do you actually practice this? One of the best ways is by watching series in English, especially shows with natural, everyday dialogue. Pick a scene that you enjoy. It could be from a comedy, a drama, even a reality show. Play the scene once with English subtitles and listen carefully. Don't try to understand every word. Just notice how people speak. Pay attention to the small expressions they use. Then play the scene again, this time without subtitles, and try to identify a few chunks that stand out. You'll begin to hear phrases like, "I don't know," "kind of," "we'll see," "let me think," "sounds good," "no worries," "come on," or "I gotta go." These are chunks. They're not full sentences, but they carry meaning, emotion, and intent. Once you've found a few of these chunks, pause the video and repeat them out loud. Not just once, but a few times. Try to copy the rhythm and the intonation. Feel the flow. This is not about memorizing a list. It's about getting used to how English sounds when it's spoken naturally. After a few days of doing this, your ears will start to recognize the same chunks in other conversations. You'll start to notice that people use them all the time, and slowly you'll begin to use them yourself without even thinking. Another great way to practice chunks is by listening to music. Choose a song in English that has clear, simple lyrics, something you enjoy listening to more than once. Play the song a few times and write down the phrases that repeat. Notice how the singer connects words, how they pronounce them, and how certain lines flow together. You'll see that songs are full of chunks, phrases like, "take it easy," "let it go," "make it right," "hold on tight." These phrases might be simple, but they're powerful. And the more you listen, the more natural they'll feel. What's important here is that you're training your ear, not your memory. You're helping your brain recognize real English as it's spoken by real people, not just the version you see in textbooks. You're building a sense of familiarity with the language, which is what allows you to understand without needing to translate everything in your head. And that's a huge step toward fluency. I've had students from all over the world use this method, and they're often surprised by how quickly they improve. One woman from Vienna told me she spent years trying to understand every single word in a sentence, and it left her frustrated. But once she started focusing on chunks, she began understanding entire conversations without translating. A man from Porto shared that he used to feel lost during group chats at work, but now he listens for key expressions and feels much more comfortable responding. The difference wasn't in how many words they knew, it was in how they listened. The chunk strategy also helps reduce anxiety. When you stop focusing on every individual word, you stop feeling overwhelmed. You begin to realize that even if you miss a word, you can still understand the message. That's how native speakers listen too. They don't catch every word all the time. They listen for meaning, tone, and familiar phrases. And that's what you're learning to do when you train your ear with chunks. You don't need a lot of time to make this work. Even 10 minutes a day can bring big results. The key is consistency. Make it part of your daily routine. Pick a scene from your favorite show, a short podcast, or a song you love. Find 2 or 3 chunks. Listen, repeat, and pay attention to how they sound. Use them in your own sentences. Say them out loud in the mirror. Whisper them when you're walking. Make them part of your voice. Over time, these chunks become part of your internal language. They help you speak more naturally, understand more quickly, and feel more confident in any situation. You stop guessing and start connecting. And the more you connect with the rhythm and flow of English, the closer you get to thinking in English. Not through force, but through familiarity. That's the power of listening the right way. That's the power of the chunk strategy. Let me tell you a story that I think many of you will relate to. It's about someone named Luca, a mechanical engineer from Milan, who had studied English for most of his life. He was hardworking, intelligent, and very dedicated to improving his language skills. He had taken courses, passed exams, and even traveled to English-speaking countries for short periods. On paper, his English looked great, but whenever he had to speak or listen in real time, especially in fast conversations, everything seemed to fall apart. He told me that even a simple chat with a colleague from the UK felt exhausting. Every time someone spoke, his brain would go into overdrive. He would hear the English, quickly translate it into Italian in his mind, try to form a response in Italian, and then translate that response back into English before opening his mouth. By the time he was ready to speak, the conversation had already moved on. This pattern made him feel stuck. He said that speaking felt like doing mental gymnastics. He couldn't relax. He couldn't enjoy conversations. Even worse, he began avoiding situations where he might need to speak spontaneously. And when he did speak, he sounded robotic and unsure. Not because he didn't know the words, but because he was trapped in a loop of translation. He believed he had to understand every word perfectly before he could respond. He believed that if he didn't translate, he would say something wrong. And that belief kept him from making progress. One day, while trying to find new listening materials online, Luca came across a video about a technique called shadowing. It was a simple idea. Listen to native English audio and repeat what you hear immediately, word for word, trying to match the rhythm, tone, and speed of the speaker. You don't pause the audio. You don't stop to translate. You don't worry if you don't understand every word. You just follow the speaker's voice as closely as you can, like an echo. At first, Luca wasn't sure if it would help. It sounded strange to repeat things without understanding them completely. But he was tired of feeling stuck, so he gave it a try. He started with short podcast episodes and movie scenes, just 2 or 3 minutes at a time. He would play the audio and speak along, trying to match the sounds. It felt awkward in the beginning. His tongue didn't want to move fast enough. He stumbled over the words. He got lost in the sentences. But he kept going. He didn't stop to correct himself or check the meaning. He just listened and echoed. Day after day, he practiced this for 10 or 15 minutes. And slowly, something began to change. After a couple of weeks, he noticed that the sentences he was repeating started to feel familiar. He didn't have to think about them anymore. They came out of his mouth naturally. He was no longer translating every word. Instead, he began to understand full phrases as they were. He said it was like his brain had finally stopped translating and started absorbing. One day, during a video call with a colleague, he noticed something else. He was speaking without planning. He was reacting in real time. He didn't have to build the sentence in Italian first. It just came out. That was a big moment for him. Not because he was perfect, but because he felt free. He told me that the biggest shift wasn't just in his listening or speaking. It was in his mindset. He stopped trying to control every part of the conversation. He stopped judging himself for not understanding every word. And because of that, he became more present. He started listening for meaning, not for grammar. He started noticing the emotion behind the words. And because his focus was on the speaker, not on his inner voice, he understood more and responded faster. Luca's story is powerful because it shows us this. Fluency isn't just about vocabulary or grammar. It's about breaking the habit of translation. It's about trusting yourself to listen and respond in the moment. And it's about giving yourself permission to make mistakes while you build real fluency. When you shadow native speakers, you're not just copying sounds. You're training your brain to think in English. You're creating new neural pathways. You're developing a sense of how the language flows, how sentences are formed, how tone and rhythm shape meaning. And you're doing it through practice, not pressure. He also shared something that really stayed with me. He said, "At first, I thought I needed to translate everything to understand. But when I stopped translating, I actually understood more." That's the secret so many learners miss. Translation feels like control, but it often blocks real understanding. When you let go of that control, you allow your brain to process English as English, and that's when real listening happens. That's when you stop surviving conversations and start participating in them. Now, Luca listens to English podcasts without subtitles. He watches interviews and live streams and enjoys them, even if he misses a few words. He says things like, "Sounds about right," "That's fair," and "Let me think," phrases he picked up during shadowing practice. These expressions weren't taught in his grammar books. He learned them by hearing, repeating, and using them. And that's what makes them part of his natural voice. His story reminds us that understanding and speaking fluent English isn't about perfection. It's about learning to think in the language, trusting your instincts, and training your ears and mouth together. If you find yourself translating every sentence in your head, if you feel like conversations are too fast or too difficult, try shadowing. Just 5 or 10 minutes a day can make a huge difference. Repeat what you hear, feel the rhythm, don't stop to analyze, let your brain adjust. That's how Luca made the leap from translation to fluency. And that's how you can too. If you listen often enough, you'll start to notice those habits. You'll begin to hear that going to almost always sounds like gonna, that want to becomes wanna, and that got to sounds like gotta. I remember a listener from Lion who shared how this shift in mindset helped her. She used to pause videos constantly, trying to catch every word. It made her tired and frustrated. But after we talked about rhythm and blending, she started watching short clips without pausing, just listening for the general idea. She stopped trying to hear every single word and instead listened for the overall flow. After a few weeks, she began catching entire phrases she used to miss. Her ears had adapted, not because she had learned more vocabulary, but because she had learned how to listen differently. If you find fast English frustrating, try this. Take a short audio clip, no more than 1 minute, and play it several times. Don't try to write anything down at first. Just listen. On the first play, notice the general meaning. On the second, listen for repeated phrases or patterns. On the third, try shadowing. Repeat what you hear as quickly and closely as you can. You'll stumble, and that's okay. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is to let your ears and mouth move together in rhythm with the language. This process works best when you use content that reflects natural speech. Interviews, casual podcasts, short scenes from shows or movies. These sources show you how real people talk, not how scripts are written. Over time, you'll begin to hear fast English as something familiar, not something scary. You'll start recognizing that what once sounded like a blur is actually full of patterns you already know. There's nothing wrong with needing time to adjust to fast speech. It's a skill. Just like learning to drive or play an instrument. At first, it feels too fast, too much. But the more you practice, the more your brain starts recognizing the patterns, and eventually everything slows down in your mind, even when the speaker keeps going at full speed. So remember, fast English isn't a wall you can't climb. It's a rhythm you can learn to dance with. And every time you listen with attention, without judgment, your ears become stronger, your understanding becomes faster, and your confidence grows. Speed is not the enemy. It's part of the language's beauty, and it's something you can absolutely learn to understand. I often get asked, Julia, what's the best way to improve my listening skills without spending hours every day? And I understand the question completely. Most people are busy. You have jobs, families, responsibilities. You can't always sit for an hour with textbooks or do long listening exercises. But the good news is, you don't need to study for hours to see real progress. What really matters is consistency. Creating simple, focused habits you can repeat every day. These small routines, even if they take just 5 or 10 minutes, can make a big difference if you stick with them. So today, I want to share 3 daily listening habits that actually work. They're easy to start. They don't require any special tools. And they train your brain to process real English the way native speakers use it. The first habit is one of the most powerful. Listen to short native English clips twice. That's it. Just pick a short video, podcast segment, or scene from a show, something 1 to 3 minutes long, and listen to it twice. The first time, use English subtitles. The goal is to understand the main message and notice any words or chunks that are unfamiliar. Don't pause or take notes. Just watch or listen and absorb the sound and the meaning together. Then, on the second play, turn the subtitles off. Listen again, and this time focus on the rhythm and the connection between words. Notice how the speaker moves from one phrase to another. Try to hear the chunks, the reductions, and the tone. You don't need to understand every word on the second listen. What you're doing is training your ear to recognize the flow of natural English. Over time, your brain starts to predict what comes next. It begins to recognize the phrases native speakers use over and over. This habit takes just a few minutes a day, but it helps you build real-world listening skills. You're not just learning vocabulary, you're learning how English sounds when it's spoken quickly, casually, and naturally. The second habit is about focus. When you're watching or listening to English content, choose one speaker to follow at a time. Especially in interviews, panel discussions, or group scenes, there can be multiple voices. Each speaker has a different rhythm, accent, and style. So instead of trying to understand everyone, pick one person and tune into their voice. Listen closely to their pacing, their intonation, and their favorite expressions. Each speaker gives you a new example of how English can sound, and focusing on just one helps your brain adapt more quickly. For example, if you're watching an interview with an actor or public figure, choose to follow only that person's responses. If you're listening to a podcast with 2 or 3 hosts, focus on just one speaker for the whole episode. You'll notice how their speech flows, what kind of chunks they use, and how they express agreement, doubt, excitement, or hesitation. You'll begin to hear their style, and that's an important part of building your own natural listening and speaking rhythm. The third habit is writing, but not in a way that feels like homework. After listening to something in English, a video, a podcast, a song, take just 2 or 3 minutes to write down the new chunks or expressions you heard. Not individual words, but short phrases. Maybe you heard, "I'm not so sure," "Sounds good to me, let me think," or "You know what I mean." Write those down. These are the real pieces of language that make conversations flow. They're not formal. They're not textbook English. They're the way people actually talk. Once you've written down a few new chunks, take a moment to use them in your own sentences. You don't need to write a paragraph. Just write 1 or 2 sentences that feel natural. For example, if you wrote down, "I guess so," you could write, "Are you coming to the meeting?" "I guess so, if I finish on time." If you heard "no big deal," maybe write, "He forgot to call, but it's no big deal." These quick examples help you internalize the phrases so they become part of your own speaking. This habit is powerful because it connects listening with speaking. You're not just passively hearing language, you're actively working with it. You're training your brain to recognize useful patterns and preparing your mouth to use them. And over time, these small bits of practice add up. You'll start to recognize the same chunks in different contexts, you'll feel more confident jumping into conversations, and you'll notice that your listening comprehension improves naturally because your brain is already familiar with how English is used in real life. I've seen these 3 habits change the way people learn. One listener from Lisbon told me she used to feel stuck every time she watched a show in English. She'd pause constantly, look up words, and end up feeling frustrated. But when she started listening to short clips twice, first with subtitles, then without, she realized that she didn't need to understand every word to follow the story. She began to hear repeated phrases, and her brain started to fill in the gaps. She also started focusing on one actor's speech in each scene, and that helped her get used to different accents. After a few weeks, she wrote to me and said, "I feel like I'm finally hearing the language, not just studying it." Another learner from Amsterdam shared how writing down chunks helped him become more comfortable in meetings at his international company. He kept a small notebook where he wrote down natural expressions he heard during conference calls. Every morning, he would review 2 or 3 of them and create quick examples in his head. After a month, his coworkers began to notice. He sounded more fluent, more relaxed, more like himself in English. These stories remind me that fluency is not something you reach by force. It's something you build through habits. Daily, simple, repeatable actions that connect you with the real sound and rhythm of English. You don't need a perfect method or perfect materials. You need consistency, curiosity, and a little bit of courage to stay with the process. These habits work because they fit into your real life, they're flexible, they're short, and they give you control over your learning. So, if you've been feeling stuck with listening or unsure of how to practice, try these habits. They may seem small, but they're powerful. Listen twice, once with subtitles, once without. Focus on one speaker. Write down new chunks and use them. That's how you train your ear, your brain, and your voice, all at the same time. That's how listening becomes something natural, something familiar, and eventually something that feels easy. One of the most powerful tools in your English learning journey, repetition. And yet, so many people avoid it. They think repeating something is boring, or that it means they're not learning fast enough. I hear it all the time. Julia, I already watched that video. I've listened to that episode once. What's next? And I always smile because I know something they might not yet. Repetition isn't boring when it's done with intention. In fact, it's one of the smartest ways to train your brain to truly understand and internalize natural English. It's not about memorizing content. It's about creating layers of familiarity and depth that turn passive understanding into active fluency. Let's think about how we learn in real life. When you hear a song you love, how many times do you play it? Probably more than once. And each time you notice something new. A lyric, a sound, an emotion. It gets stuck in your head. Not because you tried to memorize it, but because your brain absorbed it through repetition. The same thing happens with language. When you return to the same episode, the same podcast, the same scene, your brain begins to relax. It stops focusing on survival. What does that word mean? Did I understand that sentence? And starts building real comprehension. Here's a simple but effective routine I often suggest using repetition. Take one episode of a show you like. Just one. Maybe something from a series you've already started and enjoy. Not a lesson, not a lecture. A real story with real characters, natural dialogue, and emotional context. First, watch it with English subtitles. Don't pause. Don't analyze. Just watch and read. Let your eyes and ears work together. You'll catch a lot, maybe more than you expected. You'll notice expressions, tone, body language. This is your first layer, getting a general feel for the story and the way people speak. Then, after a break or the next day, watch the exact same episode again, but this time without subtitles. Now you're listening more deeply. You already know the context, so your brain is free to focus on sound. You'll hear the rhythm of sentences. You'll notice how words are connected, where the pauses happen, how emotion shapes the delivery. You might not catch every word, and that's fine. This second layer isn't about understanding everything. It's about training your ear to the music of English. You're building listening strength without even realizing it. The third step is listening to just the audio. No video, no subtitles. Maybe while going for a walk, cleaning your house, or sitting with your eyes closed. You already know the story. So now your brain starts filling in the visual memory from sound alone. You begin to recognize voices, emotions, chunks of language that felt too fast before. And what's amazing is that you'll start hearing things you didn't even notice the first time. The way someone says, "Are you serious?" with rising intonation. The casual, "I don't know," that blends into, "I don't know." These moments were always there, but now your brain is ready to catch them. This is the third layer, deep listening. Each time you go through this process, the same content becomes more alive. You're not just watching or listening. You're learning to hear English in a natural way. And this kind of repetition creates fluency, not the kind you force, but the kind that grows quietly, like muscle memory. You don't need to move on to a new episode every day. You don't need to constantly chase new vocabulary or unfamiliar accents. What you need is depth, familiarity, connection, and repetition gives you that. I once worked with a student from Berlin who loved a particular comedy series. He had watched the first season in his native language years before and decided to revisit it in English. At first, he watched with subtitles and felt like he only understood 60%. But he liked the story, so he decided to rewatch the episodes again. This time, he turned off the subtitles. He said it was like stepping into a different world. He began hearing phrases that flew past him before. Expressions like, "No way!" "You've got to be kidding!" or "Let's grab something to eat." These weren't new vocabulary items. They were real speech patterns, spoken quickly, connected naturally, filled with emotion. Then he started listening to the audio on his commute. And everything changed. Suddenly, those characters' voices became familiar. He started repeating lines out loud. He felt more confident speaking with coworkers because he had heard real examples of casual conversation, not just studied phrases from a textbook. And what amazed him most was how much he enjoyed it. Repetition didn't feel like study. It felt like getting to know a friend better every time they talked. This kind of listening practice is deeply effective because it mimics how children learn language. They don't demand new stories every day. They watch the same cartoon 20 times. They repeat lines. They play with language. And that repetition builds fluency naturally. You can do the same. In fact, returning to something familiar helps your brain relax. It stops wasting energy on understanding the story and starts focusing on how the language works. I always tell my listeners, stop worrying about quantity. Start focusing on quality. You don't need 50 new videos. You need one good one that you enjoy. One scene, one conversation. That's enough. Explore it. Live with it. Play it back. Listen while you cook. Repeat the lines while brushing your teeth. Every time you return to it, you're not wasting time. You're strengthening your ear, deepening your understanding, and giving your brain the repetition it needs to build fluency. If you want to speak English naturally, you need to listen deeply. And deep listening doesn't come from constant variety. It comes from repeated exposure, from falling in love with a voice, a story, a scene, from hearing it again and again until it becomes part of your internal language. It's not boring, it's not slow, it's smart. It's how your brain learns best. And it's something you can start today with something you already enjoy. That's the power of repetition. When it's done with care and curiosity, it transforms familiar content into a training ground for real, lasting fluency. The important part is that you're choosing content based on what feels right for you in the moment. Not what someone else says is best, not what sounds most academic or serious. This freedom, it makes learning sustainable and personal. Another beautiful thing about following what you enjoy is this. You build a natural connection with the voice behind the content, whether it's a YouTuber, a podcast host, or a comedian. You hear their voice again and again. You hear their expressions, their rhythm, their style. That repetition builds familiarity. And suddenly, listening becomes easier. It becomes more fun. You start anticipating their jokes. You might even catch yourself copying their tone or their favorite phrases in your own English. That emotional connection, it turns listening practice into something that feels like friendship, not homework. Now, I know some learners feel nervous when they move toward casual content. They say, but the accent is too strong. The language is too informal. It's hard to follow. And yes, at first it can be tricky. But remember this, every real English learner faces that challenge. And when you're curious and engaged, your brain wants to figure it out. It wants to understand. You'll look up new phrases. You'll listen to the tricky parts again. Why? Because the content matters to you. That motivation, that's where real progress begins. So, if you ever feel stuck in your listening practice, ask yourself this: what do I actually love? What kind of content makes you want to listen? Maybe it's a travel vlog from London, a cooking show from New York, a comedy special from Dublin, a podcast about daily life in Toronto. Whatever it is, choose that. Give yourself permission to enjoy it. No guilt, no judgment. The best listening practice is the one you want to come back to again and again, because it feels good. I want you to imagine this. What if listening to English felt like opening a gift? Like discovering a new story, a new laugh, a new voice you love? That's the kind of listening practice that builds fluency. Not through pressure, but through curiosity, through connection. So don't be afraid to choose what feels right for you. Your brain will thank you. Your confidence will grow, and your English will feel more alive. Let me tell you a story about Thomas, a listener from Paris. His journey with English listening shows just how much things can change when you follow what you enjoy. For a long time, Thomas believed the best way to learn was by watching serious content, business videos, economic reports, corporate interviews. It all sounded important, and it seemed like the right way to learn. But there was one big problem. He was bored. He couldn't stay focused, and his progress slowed. One evening, Thomas was scrolling online. He stumbled across a clip from a late-night stand-up show. He clicked play just out of curiosity. And to his surprise, he laughed. Not because he understood every joke, but because something clicked. The energy, the rhythm, the emotion in the speaker's voice. It felt real. And it felt good. That small moment changed everything. Thomas started watching short comedy clips every day, 5 or 10 minutes here and there. At first, the jokes flew over his head. But he kept going, because he enjoyed it. He started hearing repeated phrases. He noticed how comedians told stories, used emotion, and repeated punchlines. It was different from business English. It was alive. And over time, Thomas began to understand more. He recognized punchlines. He repeated lines out loud. He even started joking in English with his coworkers. His English stopped sounding like a textbook and started sounding real. What I love about Thomas's story is this. He discovered that there's no one right way to learn English. There's only your way. If business videos bore you, that's okay. You don't need to force it. Find something that makes you smile, something that pulls you in, something that makes you want to hit play again tomorrow. Now, let's talk about stand-up comedy. It might sound challenging. The speech is fast, there's slang, cultural jokes, wordplay. But here's the truth. You don't need to understand everything. Just enjoy the rhythm. Watch the same clip more than once. Use subtitles. Pause when you want to. Each time you return, you'll catch more. And what felt impossible at first will slowly become familiar. Laughter and joy are powerful tools for learning. When you connect emotionally with English, your brain responds with focus, memory, and motivation. Learning becomes less about effort and more about experience. That's when real fluency begins. So, if you're ready to try, start small. Search for short stand-up comedy clips on YouTube. Look for comedians who speak clearly and talk about everyday life. Watch one clip a few times. Laugh, learn, repeat, and let your listening become something you look forward to. Let's finish today's episode with one final truth. Many learners feel frustrated because they don't feel ready to speak English. They study grammar, they know vocabulary, but in a real conversation, they freeze and they ask, "Why can't I speak fluently yet?" Let me say this clearly. Understanding comes before speaking. Think about music. You don't sit at a piano and play a song perfectly the first time. You listen to it again and again. You feel the rhythm. You hum the melody. And eventually, you play. Speaking works the same way. Before your mouth can speak fluent English, your brain needs to build an audio library. That library is created through listening. When you listen often to podcasts, movies, shows, songs, you absorb rhythm, intonation, real phrasing. You hear how words connect. You hear when voices rise in questions or fall in doubt. And even if you're not speaking yet, your brain is getting ready. So please, don't be discouraged. Listening is not passive. It's active preparation for fluency. It's training your brain to understand and eventually produce natural English. When you listen with intention, when you follow your curiosity, when you choose content you love, you are already becoming fluent. I want to talk about something that can truly shift your English learning experience, especially if you've ever felt stuck, nervous, or unsure about your speaking. Let me tell you about a learner from Munich. She worked so hard, practicing alone, repeating phrases, memorizing dialogues. But when it came time for real conversations, she felt nervous, hesitant, frustrated. So, we made a small shift. Instead of focusing only on speaking, she started listening, watching her favorite TV shows with subtitles, going for walks with English podcasts in her ears, noticing how people actually spoke. And slowly, things changed. She began to hear sentence patterns, rhythms, sounds she hadn't noticed before. A few weeks later, her speaking became easier, less stressful, more fluid, and that's the power of listening. Not passive listening, deep, intentional listening. When you hear English again and again, your brain starts copying. Your mouth begins to move more naturally. You're learning pronunciation not from rules, but from rhythm, from melody, from real English. It's like learning to sing, not by reading sheet music, but by listening and repeating. And here's something else. Listening builds your vocabulary in context. You hear phrases inside stories, words used with emotion, sentences that feel real. And when you understand the tone, the feeling behind the words, that vocabulary sticks. So, if you're wondering why speaking still feels hard, maybe you're just missing enough listening. It's not a flaw. It's not failure. It's just a step you haven't fully taken yet. Every great speaker I've worked with was a great listener first. So, listen every day, even if it's just for 5 minutes. Notice the way words connect, how people pause, where their voice rises, what sounds repeat. The more you listen, the more ready your brain will be when it's your turn to speak. Because listening is not a small part of learning English. It's the foundation. Let's go even deeper. One of the biggest challenges learners face is not vocabulary or grammar. It's the flow of English, that natural, fast, connected way native speakers talk. And today, I want to help you tune into that flow. Let's start with stress. Not every word in English gets the same attention. Some are strong, some are soft. In I want to go to the store, the words want and store are stressed. The rest, softer, quicker, and sometimes they blend. I want to go to the store. It sounds fast because the rhythm is smooth. Try to listen for those beats, like music. When you catch the strong beats, you'll follow the meaning, even if some words disappear. Now, what about intonation? That's the rise and fall in someone's voice. It tells you if they're asking a question, sharing a feeling, or making a joke. Are you coming? That rise at the end, it's a question. I'm coming. That fall, it's a statement. Listening to this rise and fall helps you understand the emotion, not just the words. Finally, we've got connected speech. Words don't live alone in English. They connect, blend, sometimes even vanish. What are you doing can sound like what you doing, or going to becomes gonna. It's fast, but there's a pattern, and when you recognize it, English stops feeling confusing and starts feeling familiar. You don't need to catch every single word. You need to catch the rhythm, the tone, the flow. Start small. Listen to a short dialogue or clip. First, find the stressed words. Then notice how the voice rises and falls. Then try saying it yourself. Connected, smooth, natural. A learner from Amsterdam told me she tried this 3 times with one podcast. First for rhythm, then for tone, then for connection. And suddenly, English felt like music. Now, I want to speak to you heart to heart. So many of you write to me and say, Julia, I'm not good enough yet. I want to be perfect. I'm afraid to make mistakes. I hear you. And I want to say something gently but clearly. Perfection is not the goal. Connection is. When you understand enough to laugh at a joke, follow a conversation, or share your thoughts, you are fluent enough to connect. Language is not a test. It's a tool, a bridge, a way to feel closer to others. And even native speakers make mistakes, forget words, say things the wrong way. You're not here to be perfect. You're here to grow. And you're doing that every single time you listen, every time you speak, even if it's messy. Progress doesn't come from pressure. It comes from presence, from showing up, from trying again and again. And if you remember nothing else from today, remember this. Fluency is not about perfection. It's about connection. Let's wrap up with a simple challenge. You don't need hours. You just need 5 minutes. Pick something in English you enjoy. A podcast clip, a YouTube short, a voice message from a friend. Listen to it once. Just enjoy the sound. No pressure. Then, listen again. This time, focus. What phrase jumps out? What sounds good or useful? Write it down. Then say it out loud. 3 times. That's it. 1 phrase, 5 minutes, 1 small win. These moments build your fluency quietly, day by day. If you want, share what you picked in the comments, or keep it in your notebook. Whatever feels right for you. But do it, not for perfection, but for progress. And remember, you're not doing this alone. You've got me, you've got this community, and most importantly, you've got your own motivation. Keep showing up, keep listening, keep going. You're doing great, and I'm so proud of you.